fear of failure was never a problem for me. And I would tell people, like, don't be afraid to fail. You're going to fail. Just fail fast, fail forward. A lot of my failures are why I'm successful today. And those are learnings and journeys. So I think everybody should have those. If you're perfect, you're not failing and you're not learning. And so you have to be curious, you have to learn. I think a lot of times where you see toxic environments are when leaders just think it's everybody else's job. At the end of the day, people choose people, and it's still a people business, and you cannot forget the people in this journey.
All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of First Contact Stories of the Call Center. I'm your host, Christian Montes, and today we're going to be diving into the world of transformational leadership and also the evolution of customer experience with someone who knows a little bit about that. And so with that being said, Colleen Beers, the Chief Administrative Officer at Alorica, is a true visionary when it comes to creating high-impact strategies for the contact center. Now, if you don't know Colleen has over 20 years of experience and has been successful in leading turnarounds, startups, post-merger integrations, all while fostering a culture that prioritizes wellness and accessibility for both the employees and the customers alike. I'm super excited to have you on, Colleen. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, and thank you for the invite, and looking forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, and we always start the show with your journey, right? We always sit back and laugh about like how we got into the contact center space, and that's not where we thought we were going to do when we grew up, right? When we first were kids and going to go, hey, well, I'm going to have a career. I'm going to work in the contact center space. That's going to be a dream job. So how did you get here? What does the origin story look like?
Yeah, I think mine looks like a lot of others, and I'm determined to change that for like the next generation. Like, I want people to wake up and be like, I want to be in customer service, not I don't want to be here. It's a temporary stop. But I was actually destined to be a nurse, and absolutely was going to be in the medical profession, and was putting my way through nursing school when I needed a part-time job to, pay for something other than ramen and bologna sandwiches and a car. And so I thought, why not try telemarketing? And when I started, we didn't have the technology we had today. We basically had a big brown tub of leads and a brown phone on your, desk. And it was old school. So I started as an agent, and I was afforded the opportunity to become a manager, and I worked my way up in this industry. I held every different position, but there was a time and just a pivotal moment where I really knew that I can help lives and make lives better, whether it was on the other end of the phone or the people I was coaching or the teams that I was supporting. And it wasn't messy. It didn't have anything to do with blood and urine. And I ejected my way out of nursing and realized, wow, I can have an impact. And there's like more to life out there other than this nursing career that I was pursuing. And along my medical journey and in my childhood, I always wanted to be a speech and hearing pathologist. And when I lost hearing, I definitely wanted to help others. So in this customer service base, I found a way that I could do both. So I just thought, well, this is just an interesting career journey and different path. And I'm going to go follow this and see what happens. And 30 years later, here I am.
When I'm thinking about that dynamic of when it is that someone finds that moment where they're like, man, my career path that I had made out for me and I was set that that's what I want to do becomes something else. And specifically for you, when it comes to that helping people, it seems to be a theme where there's this moment in which you feel like where you're at or what you're doing allows you to achieve that. So were there any like mentors, or were there any scenarios where you had that moment where you said, this can actually give me that ability to help people versus, oh my gosh, I'm just doing this to pay the bills and there's high turnover and I'm coming in and out? Was there a mentor, a supervisor, a leader? Was there that moment, or was it just you going, I can see past this, and in spite of all the mess that could be there, I'm going to be successful at X?
I think, first of all, I was very young. So I'll just clarify, I was 19. And there was a couple of moments, but specifically, there was definitely something inside me that was like, I'm drawn to this. And I felt, in today's kids terminology, I was swiping left. I could feel myself being drawn to this call center, this environment. But it was the moment when I actually interacted with our clients. It was accidental death and dismemberment for J.C. Penney. I'll never forget it. And our CEO at the time, um, Ed Blank. It was the questions they were asking me. I was in a focus group and everyone was quiet. Nobody wanted to tell the client what was really happening on the phone or their experiences. They were shy. It was a business environment. And I just remember thinking, I need to speak up. They need help. They're asking for help. So I was very direct and had this conversation. And I remember the tap on the shoulder afterwards to come to visit with James Giello, who was the vice president, but the president at the time. And he was like, you really gave great feedback. I really appreciate it. This has propelled our business forward. And he explained to me how this helped his business, which helped agents, which helped the customer, which helped sales. And just really at that moment, really excited me about, wow, just a small contribution in this conversation really helped a lot of different people. And James was my mentor, and he took me under his wing at that very moment and just really taught me everything about the business. And he kept tapping me and said, this is just natural. You're just a natural leader. And that's what he kept telling me. And I didn't really understand what that meant. But I knew, it's like that balance. It's almost like somebody shaping what is inside you. And it was just always a fire inside me. Like I want to help others. And I was always in sports and I was a cheerleader and band. I tried everything. I was one of those kids like there was nothing for me. Like everything was going to be like something I could do. And I wasn't really always great at everything I did. Trust me, I was not a great color guard person. However, I never had the fear and I was just always willing to try or put myself out there. And I think that's what gave me the ability to be a leader. And there were obviously a lot of other traits, but just at a young age. And so, yes, there were a couple different moments. And honestly, those two individuals for multiple years invested in me. And I'm very grateful. And it's forever paid off. So,
That's so amazing that not only that you had that opportunity, but you were able to harness that inner part of you that many times many people don't let out. And some of it's fear, some of it's they're surrounded by people that don't believe in them. They're
yes,
constantly shutting them down. And sometimes that fear keeps us from finding out whether or not that thing is as scary as it really is. And many times it's not. And we're
absolutely.
past that fear and really start getting that momentum because like we talk about that boulder, you're pushing it and it's so much effort and time to get it moving, but once it's moving and you have some momentum, it is so much easier. And so it's really cool to see that piece of you balanced well with a mentor or mentors during that time. So there are a lot of people that are going to know in our audience the brand Alorica. Now, for those that don't know Alorica, you've been there for a little while, right? And so you've had a variety of roles there and you've gotten to the role you're at today. Can you kind of share a little bit about what your journey's been like at Alorica, what Alorica does from a holistic standpoint, and then what your role is there?
I'm actually in a rewirement for my career, but let me explain. Alorica is one of the largest BPO players in this space. 100,000 employees worldwide, multiple countries, multiple languages, supporting Fortune 100, 500 organizations for technical and customer support in a lot of different ways. And starting as an agent, working my way up to the senior position has been such an inspiration for me. But really, what I love the most about my career journey is that it's been an inspiration for others. And I tell people what Andy Lee, who's the founder of Alorica, and what Alorica allowed me to do was impact others and truly make lives better. So, not just from a career perspective, but literally changing communities and people and really giving back to individuals who could change their life moments in their career journeys in different countries all over the world. And that's really what I'm sitting and rewiring, trying to figure out, okay, what's my next move? Like, how do I continue to do that? Because I was able to do so much with Alorica. And in that role, in my last role as the chief administrative officer, I spent really 28 years, 27 years in operations and sales, developing people, leading people, achieving KPIs, trying to meet your promises and your commitments, not just to the customers, but to our clients and their customers. And pivoting to the chief administrative officer role, I had all the back office. So I had a new appreciation and learning for what workforce did, what HR does, what recruiting does. And I had responsibility for all the support departments that support the functions of operations, that we're there. And I always say they're kind of behind the scenes and it's just a given, but they're not always in the limelight in front of clients because they're just doing what they're supposed to do. And then, I think from a operations perspective or a sales, you're always focused on the business or growth, right? And you're always focused on, are you meeting your KPIs? But there's a lot of people behind the scenes having to meet the KPIs that aren't on those day-to-day calls that just have to get it done. And I focused on those employees, and it was eye-opening to me. And also a great experience for me because I was able to figure out how to do things differently. So with an operational mindset and a sales mindset, our CEO at the time, Greg Holler, said, Colleen, I think you're going to be perfect for this role. And he sort of propelled me into this role because I had this experience. And I thought, well, I mean, I obviously I know a little bit about HR and I know a little bit about people and I know a little bit about workforce, et cetera. And I thought, why do you think I'm going to be, so great at this? And he thought, out loud to me, I think you're going to bring the sales and operational needs and you're going to be able to, cross collaborate and just propel the support teams forward and also bring, excitement to those teams. And I think explaining the business, sort of reigniting the passion, and then also making sure that we recognize them in a different way than we have been is really going to move the company forward. And that's exactly what it did. So I learned a lot. They learned a lot. I always say that we grew together. I had never had responsibility for global learning. We had great leaders in that department, but I was able to see what the operations team needed from the training department. So the two of us or the groups of us put our heads together and thought, how can we propel this forward and change this, with people, process, tools, and technology. So it was quite the journey for me. And that's actually where I spent a lot of time diving into AI and learning the tech that was out there to support these teams and how we could, efficiently and proficiently support these other departments. And it was such a great experience. And I think it changed who I want to be and how I want to be as a leader, honestly, going forward for my next 10 years.
There's so much to unpack there, okay?
Yeah.
And we don't have enough time in this conversation, so I wish we can continue it for the next pieces we dive into. But I mean, the idea that the back office is just supposed to work, and the sales and getting new customers and keeping new customers and all that, even though that gets a lot of the attention, like you had mentioned, I always compare it to like electricity, right? It's just supposed to work, right? And it's always supposed to be there. You don't care necessarily per se how it works. You just want to make sure that when you turn it on, it works, right? But at the time, if the electricity doesn't work and your business needs it to do all the other stuff that you do, you're in a really tough spot, right? So in that scenario, the fact that you're able to take all that front end experience and go to the backside and see what happens behind the scenes and how all the magic works, where it's just supposed to work. It's kind of cool because a lot of businesses run in silos, and we all know that when you grow through acquisition and mergers, especially like your journey through Alorc with a lot of businesses being purchased and divested from and business units and so on and so forth, that when you bring in all those silos, how do you have them work together? And some of that is having the understanding of the part that's in the light. Is it important? What do they do and what do they need? And the part that's the supporting cast, why are they so critical for the success of the other part? That even though they don't get all of the accolades that many brands put towards the front end, that they're just as important. And without them, no one succeeds. So it's kind of cool you're able to bring that journey into the inside and kind of get that behind the scene view and bring that up to a surface level where people can appreciate it in a different manner. So that's really neat to see. Now, from a cultural standpoint, right, there's a lot of pieces where the brand of business and the culture goes from the top down. And sometimes when it's like at the bottom and it gets stuck and middle management never gets to the top, what did you see during your journey from going into the leadership perspective when it came to culture, and what importance did culture have within your organization you were at and others, of where it made a big impact, it was good, or where it was like, yeah, without this, we're not going to succeed?
Um, so because I have had the opportunity to experience good culture and bad culture, I would say the best experiences are when leaders know that they're there to cultivate the culture. I think a lot of times where you see toxic environments are when leaders just think it's everybody else's job. And they'll, if people approach you and they'll say, we need this or this is an issue, there's a lot of leaders out there, they'll say, well, just fix it. You so I believe that that's what we're there for. I also believe that it is the responsibility of the people. So they have to know that they have to be part of it. But leaders have to make them feel part of it and create opportunities for them to feel heard and for them to feel like they can own the culture and help drive the culture, because there's a lot of cultures where they say, well, we have an open door policy and we listen to our people, and you don't. you know so it's critical for people to understand what the front line needs. So I've just been an individual leader or a part of multiple executive teams or cultures that have succeeded, where we listen. First of all, you got to know the community. It always starts with, where are you doing business? How are you helping the community? And are you engaged with the community? And in our space, that's important because you're recruiting the community. So it doesn't matter if you're remote. It doesn't matter if you have a physical standing building. You're in the community. So it starts with community. What are you doing for that community? And then what are you doing for your people? How are you listening to the people? What is the journey of the people? How are you getting the feedback from the people? How are you engaging? How are you supporting the leadership? And are you staying in front of the people? And it always really comes back to some basics. And I don't think it's that complicated. And maybe I oversimplify it, but it's really communicating, what does your company do? What is the vision of your company? How that person fits into the role of supporting that commitment or vision, mission. And then what you're doing for that individual and what opportunity they have or don't have. Um, so communication is so critical. And then the processes that you put in place to communicate that and support that communication. It really doesn't have to be complicated. I think a lot of times we put in these elaborate processes and elaborate programs, and sometimes we make them so complicated that you can't meet your own commitments to your people. And so I always challenge leadership to say, that sounds like a great program, but are you going to be able to maintain that program? So we instituted a lot of different programs over the years at Alorica that actually were people led. And it was one of our founders' really biggest challenges to us to say, let the people decide what they want and then figure out how they can participate, because things that are organically grown from the people up, not from corporate down, you can support. And usually they're more simple than what we can create. And I thought that was brilliant. And, but I thought, how's that going to work? There's 100,000 of them and very few of us. So how does that, happen? And it does organically happen in a lot of ways. But sometimes it happens when you are challenged to do that. And he challenged us to do that. And we were able to make that happen. So again, communication, simplification, and then inclusion, always inclusion. Diversity of thought is what I think propels companies forward and can be a differentiator. And when you put 100,000 people heads together, they're always better than one.
It's so funny you said that commentary earlier about, you may be just oversimplifying it and it's not that difficult. And it just always reminds me of something one of my mentors has always told me is that people complicate things. You know,
Yes.
people are the complication, right? People end up making things harder than they should be. And sometimes the things that are the simplest and the straightforward and the quickest to just get a decision made versus, you know, a paralysis by analysis and all the things that happen to get in the way and fear and so on and so forth. It's funny that you were saying that because I'm just sitting there laughing and going, yeah, it's true. Because a lot of times when things get really complicated or they don't work, it's because we're overcomplicating. It's not the system per se, it's not the process per se, is that people are putting in these processes or they're bringing in technology without knowing what they want it to do.
Oh, yeah. That's a big opportunity.
This is James. James is a contact center manager with a passion for philosophy and hiking. As a kid, he made a promise to himself that he would always follow his passion. Today, he ponders on the thought that this promise is probably the best decision he ever made. Today, James loves his job just as much as he loves hiking. So much that he sometimes brings the scent of fresh pine and the tranquility of the mountain streams back to the office with him. With Nobel Biz as his company's provider, James found the necessary peace of mind to finally bridge the gap between his passion and his work. By choosing to partner with the promise-keeping voice and software provider of the industry, contact center technical issues, downtime, and poor customer experience are now a thing of the past. In an industry ruled by uncertainty, Nobel Biz combines balanced pricing with the highest quality, topped off with outstanding support. But above all, Nobel Biz delivers peace of mind to contact center managers and owners. And for the first time, James hit that sweet spot of focus and confidence that is allowing him to take his business to new heights of profitability and success. After all, you know what they say, promises are the uniquely human way of ordering the future. Nobel Biz, the promise keepers of the industry.
There is this part of us that isn't so transactional that when we get into the nitty gritty of it is yes, I want an answer. Yes, I want it quickly. Yes, I want to feel like you're just not shoving me somewhere else and care less talking to me. But there's that part of me going, you're a human being just like me, and we can figure this out. We can have a conversation, and I don't feel like I have to earn going over this barrier of you blocking me to have a conversation. And I don't know, there was an interesting human element there that I'm sure we've learned from since the pandemic and figured out this whole hybrid and work from home environment, what worked, what didn't work, and the kind of stuff that we should keep.
I think it's reshaping how we're looking at customer service and just how to not just interact with our customers, but how to interact with our employees. And certainly the tech has propelled that forward. So I think, just the combination of all of that now is like it's here and it's like telling us like, okay, it's time to make some big changes. And it's going to be exciting in the next few years to see how that actually impacts service.
Oh, totally. Not only that, but I mean, the pool of employees, right, is so different now. You're not localized to the physical footprint of where
Yes.
your infrastructure was. And then the competition for good people. Now that person goes like, well, yeah, I can work anywhere and I can work with these five different brands. And now they have to compete for me, right? And so it's such an interesting dynamic where you can get a different talent pool. You maybe can even get a broader, better talent pool for certain use cases. But it also means maybe you have to be more competitive in the market, both in not only comp, but also from what do you bring to the table as a brand for that person to say, yeah, I'll choose you over the other alternatives. And so I'm sure
Right.
you ran into that as well.
Absolutely. 1000%. And I think it's going to continue. So with you have different technologies being created in AI. So it wasn't just the pandemic and the labor that changed the labor market and now propelling the forward, but the labor market's also different. But now technology is enabling us to go into new labor markets and different areas that we weren't able to go in before. And it also is sort of propelling. You don't necessarily have to be in a physical location. You can now be in a remote location. So it's supporting all of that. And that's going to change, I think, the quality of service that we provide as well.
I think if implemented properly and with the end result in mind, I think you're spot on. My fear is right now we're at that cusp of, let's say, AI, right? That's the hot
Yes,
topic right now. But
sure.
unfortunately, a lot of people are implementing tech to check a box, or they're saying
Yeah.
we're left behind if we don't implement that, but they don't know why. And sometimes they're sitting there going, we're going to cut costs, and people are freaking out.
Yes.
We're going to not have agents anymore. Everything's going to be a voice bot of some sort. And so there's the other crowd that goes, no, that's not going to be the case. So you had to have been running through that in your journey where when we started talking about things like generative AI and it
Sure.
wasn't, logical branching to like the future, what are you seeing or what were you seeing when it came to not only the fear and the people going, I'm going to lose my job to here's actually where it was going to benefit if done
Yeah.
properly to make things better.
Um, so I think the first place to start is you have to know why you're implementing AI. Just let's so you're right. There are a million companies out there today, like cannot be left behind. Let's just go. And I'm interacting with those companies today and yesterday. I have a call later this afternoon, and it's we've implemented a tech and we have questions for you because you've been a user, you've also been a provider. Can you just help us like talk through sort of the change management of this? But I always go back to why did you implement it? So we implemented tech over the years for many different reasons, but we implemented tech along the employee journey. So you implement tech in your hiring practices, right? To automate, as an example, to accelerate the process, to accelerate time to hire. You implement simulation and training. There's a lot of AI simulation and training. You implement that to accelerate confidence and to accelerate retention, to create an environment, a real-time environment that gives an agent real-time practice. I back in the day we would old school role play. So you're only as good as your partner role playing with you, right? And you always created the easy experience. You never created the hard one. um, and a lot of organizations say that their trainers are taking calls and up to speed, but even trainers need simulation. And they're taking maybe an hour, 4 hours a month of calls, but they're behind closed doors 99% of the time training. So how good can their skill be if they're role play? They need simulation. You implement simulation real time with a quality AI tool, let's say. What is that quality AI tool doing for you? Is it providing you analytics? Is it providing you real-time coaching packages? Are you creating real-time simulations because you had a policy change? There's a lot of trust and safety out there today, with AI and with social media that, need support. So, you got the TikToks and you've got Meta and you've got all these different organizations. And there's a whole nother organization that's saying like, let's monitor this and let's evaluate, is it good for policy? Can we post? You have to create simulations for people. People have to be up to speed to be able to meet these quality standards. And so I always go back to why did you implement the tech? And do you have KPIs around the tech? But most importantly, and this is the conversation I have with a friend later today, did you implement the change management? Because I can remember implementing tech and going for budget for tech and going to our CFO and our founder. And he's like, Colleen, they better use that tech because the worst thing that can happen is that you implement tech and you're not using the tech. And so change management and communication of that tech is so critical. And what you're finding today is that there's this entire conversation that tech is going to replace humans, which, you know, tech is going to replace a few humans. It's not going to ever replace all the humans, but tech does create efficiency, and tech does change processes, and, will evolve your business, and there will be some cost savings. So be honest, explain to the people who are supporting the tech and people who are in the process, the department that are supporting the deployment, explain what the end goal is. And what that should do is challenge everybody to be their best. They should buy into what you're trying to do. It's always sad in a business case when you evolve and have change. Nobody wants change, and nobody wants to be that person who's going to be the one who's leaving or ejected. But if you're doing it right and you're communicating it right, most people will get behind it. And what you're going to find is your people will fight for you. So our people were fighting for that implementation because they wanted to see the success. And then people aren't really fighting the process, and they're not balking at the process. But what I'm seeing is a lot of people not implementing the change management. So they're like, we're not seeing the results for this quality tool, or we're not seeing the results of this simulation tool. And I also see a lot of companies, just in conversation today. I'm at call center week, and I'm interacting with people. I'm different conferences, and I hear a lot of fear of failure. And I also hear a lot of people describing lack of KPIs. So my advice for a couple of people out there trying to implement for sake of implementing is don't do that. Have a goal in mind. So have KPIs. Absolutely have assigned KPIs. They might evolve, but have KPIs, have a change management process, but have a communication process. That's so critical. That's part of your change management. You have to get the communication out. I'm not going to say evangelize, but you definitely have to answer the questions and the concerns that the people have. And I think you have to be honest. I think transparency, integrity, honesty through that communication with your frontline is going to get the buy-in that you need and will propel the usage of the tool and reduce fear. And once you reduce fear, you also have to explain to people you're going to try things and you're going to fail, and that's okay. But fail forward. Fail and fail quickly, but then fail forward. And in these projects, I think these teams have to know that it's okay to say, hey, we implemented this. This was the KPI. This is what we expected. We didn't get it for whatever reason. And we're, retooling or, rewiring this, this tool or the process or the communication to get the buy-in. And I think as long as you're leading authentically through these changes, I think that companies will be successful. And the companies that are doing that, you're going to see them doing it not just with their employees, but also to their customers. Because think about it. I want to know if I'm talking to a chatbot, and I don't care how authentic it could be. I probably want to know if I'm interacting with someone's chatbot. So it's okay. Just I think companies that are doing that are doing it very well. And there are examples of it out there where companies are propelling their service forward. They have high net promoter scores. They have high engagement because their self-help or their AI tools are actually easy to use, and they're fun, and they were honest about it. And they still give me the option. I like optionality. So I think the brands out there that are giving the option as well as, an opportunity. So that also helps employees understand that there's always that option. So at the end of the day, people choose people, and it's still a people business, and you cannot forget the people in this journey.
I love all of it. There's just so much there when we think about that honesty. And a lot of times we do things at people versus with them. And so when we don't bring them into the fold, we're not able to have that honest conversation of, this isn't about you behind the scenes freaking out. Any day I'm going to lose my job because this new tech's going to replace me. There's stuff you do every day that's repetitive, that you just, it's a time consumption for you, and it's just repetitive, and you don't need to have to do that. There's this part of your skill set or the potential skill set of
Absolutely.
getting you upskilled to be able to handle more complex things, things that maybe have more emotion, things that require that human empathy and connection, and for you to be able to be compassionate in a certain situation that maybe tech isn't ready for. So why not let tech done properly take care of all the stuff off your plate so that maybe you're working the same hours, but maybe you have more higher level conversations and less of the conversations that have a lot of time consumption for things that can maybe be used by whatever it is, a bot or an IVR or website,
Meaningful.
whatever. Mm-hmm.
It actually, a lot of the conversation is it's going to leave the more complex problems, but I think they're the more meaningful, the more, they're not transactional. So for the agent, I think it changes the job, yes, and skill, but it also changes like your viewpoint of what you're doing, right? So you're going to have more pride in being able to get to those more complex problems because you're solving this problem that is either a higher technical problem or a more emotional problem for that particular customer, a very sensitive issue for that customer. And we always see in this business retention rates very high when there's meaning in that I don't want to say transaction, but in that connection with that other human on the phone. So I always said in our healthcare and our financial accounts, even in some of our retail accounts, where we saw the higher complexity, we saw the higher retention. And that's because employees had pride in what they were doing, where you saw sort of that mundane, repetitive, reset password, whatever. They're like, what am I doing? This is like, 40 calls an hour for 8 hours. I'm out of here. And no matter what you did from a leadership perspective, for morale and rah rah, you still have the companies like, we got to retain these people. I'm like, I mean, if I can project the agent, to stay like 3 months longer, that's great. But the reality is they don't want to do that work. Humans want to talk to humans and feel like they're really doing something on behalf or for that human. So again, people business.
Yeah, it's so much so. And even when we were talking about earlier, that connection that you have in that interaction. Yes, we want the problem solved. Yes, we want it done quickly. Yes, I don't want to have to come back because it wasn't what we thought. But the reality is that it's still the human connection, that person and people business, which is awesome. There was the other piece you kind of said about, the purpose. What's the purpose of why you're doing this? How you're measuring it? Did you have the change management? And what I find is a lot of companies don't have an AI expert or a tech expert in the business that really understands how to take what the business wants to achieve, what is possible, meaning some of these things are so new, people don't really know what you can do with them. They just say, I want it. So you kind of have to also look at how do you go about educating yourself or having the initiative in the business, say, who's going to be our expert? Who's going to be that person that can go test something, measure it, and iterate on it? Because when people start implementing tech and it pisses them off, they want to talk to a person. Well, now you have this person that's saying your tech failed. I'm really upset. It wasted my time or it's terrible experience. And now they're going to just vent that to an agent. And the agent now has to take that experience.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. So in my rewirement, I'm actually taking an AI class, and there's a lot of different classes out there, but Harvard actually offers one. But there's all these new certifications, right? And I'll be very honest, I'm taking these classes because I see people infatuated. They're like, oh, this is going to change the world. And I'm looking at these people and they're right. It is going to change the world. But like, what do you know about it? What have you studied about it? So I think we have to study. I think we have to be smart about learning the different aspects, pros and cons. I think we have to understand, the dangers if not used properly. There's opportunity. It's not really like scary, but there's opportunity. But in doing so, I would say I haven't learned anything significantly different than what I've learned over the last 30 years. So what I know is you need a committee. You can't just have a person. It can't just be the innovative tech guy that's in the white suit creating things on a whiteboard saying we're going to go implement. It can't just be the operator or the person that's responsible for service. It's got to be. I keep telling people it's a committee of people. Get your thought leadership group together. Put your parameters around it. Have your vision for the company. Have your vision for your team. But you need more of a consensus. And by the way, you need your agents part of this. You need your front line part of that committee. Like you need the end users who know everything about your knowledge base or everything about your customer journey, everything about like what happens real time. And I think as long as you have that balanced committee and you've got the right group of people, I think you can propel. I think what I'm seeing as I'm interacting with customers and different businesses that are deploying these technologies, they have just an isolated group deploying, and then then it goes, they go into implementation mode, and then they bring in everybody, and it's kind of problematic at that point. So I think up front, and those are things that we've learned over the years, right? In this business, you've got to have a good group of people, tech, ops, that a well-rounded group that is really governing what you're doing and governing the project so that you have a really diverse thought of, hey, we need to, exit left, exit right, really guiding that team and guiding the organization. And, it's got to be a committee that, can say stop, like we've got to regroup, and you've got to have authority. And I find in a lot of our conversations, they don't have that committee. They don't have the authority. They're not reporting out, to the board or to the executive team in a timely way so that they can actually shape that journey. And they don't have frontline involved. And I think those are all huge misses. And, we've got to like regroup and go, stop running towards this tech and do the things that we know in this business propel our business forward. And it's really having that diversity of thought, having the right committees, the governing groups, and then, but including the front line and making sure you're taking the front line along with you for this experience and journey.
It's such an interesting balance because in a lot of companies, a lot of the decisions years past, the tech group made all the decisions for what and how the technology would get applied, and operations kind of just said, okay, well, this is what we have, we'll work with it. And then you evolve to ops saying, well, this is how and what we need to achieve. And then you need tech to be able to achieve it. But then you always have this gap between how do you get the non-technical group to talk to the technical group and have them come to something of, well, what does that actually mean? What does that actually look like? And so when you have this committee approach that you're talking about, you're spot on about this idea that you really have to not only have that diversity of thought, but also you do have to have the executive buy-in,
Yes.
decision-making authority, and alignment so that you don't go off and do one thing and another group's like, no, I don't have agreement with that. It was imposed on me. I wasn't even involved. They drag their
Right.
feet. It never gets implemented. Or when it does, it's such a terrible experience. And then everyone hurts. The frontline people get hurt and the customer they're serving gets hurt. And then obviously the end customer, the end person they're engaging with obviously has a terrible experience. Now, I want to kind of shift a little bit. You've really emphasized that, senior leaders should really prioritize wellness and making it part of a core piece of the culture. From your experience, when we talk about integrating mental, emotional, social health, fitness, wellness into company culture, how do you ensure that these initiatives actually not only reach everyone that it should reach, but it's implemented in a way that you can measure and say, this is actually doing what it's supposed to be doing versus I just feel good because I put in a new initiative that, is nice and happy for people.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, I go back to like 2018, 2019, 2020, COVID, just there were so many different experiences happening specifically in North America that really challenged me as a leader. Like, do I say something? Do I not say something? Are we supposed to support that? Should we not support that? And that really shaped my thought around wellness. So just to be honest, I think, I always believed that companies should have different programs. And I thought, it was the responsibility of the corporate organization to do things. And then what I realized during this time was I woke up one day and said, I'm afraid to just be me at work because I'm afraid to offend people or say something or share how I felt. And like, I thought, what am I going to do about this? And I kind of made a joke of it, but I shouldn't have. I said, like, I'm going to write a love letter to my people. And what it was just a letter to my people and said, there's so many things happening in this world that I'm just going to share how I feel. I'm waking up every day and I'm afraid just to lead every day. And that's not who I am. And anyway, the letter just really talked about, I have a Black husband, he's a cop, I have mixed children, I have an older set of children. They feel one way, the younger set of children feel a completely different way. And there's just all this angst. And I said, if I feel this way every day, you have to feel this way every day. And I just want you to know it's okay. Like, and let's figure out like how to survive together here at work to get what we have to get, like, because the news was there, social media. And I just felt this overwhelming sense, like, if I'm feeling this way, they've got to feel this way. And I remember this outpouring of like, just thank you for being honest. And, just, yes, this is, terrible. Like, can't people just be nice to people? And, what it was a response from my employee base saying, we feel the same way, and work is kind of an outlet. And we love when you do these things, and we love when the company does these things, and we need that, and we need more of it. And we did employee resource groups, and we started a bunch of different um, programs like Real Talk. So this particular outpouring just started Real Talk, where people just came to a really open, secure, trusting environment where we could just say how we felt. There was no judgment, but like the George Floyd thing was happening, and people had feelings about it, and you just needed to kind of like get it off your chest before you like took 40 calls an hour for the next 7.5 hours. Just you needed a soft place to land. And so that really opened my eyes to wellness, that wellness comes in a variety of forms. And I worked with our employees, honestly, at that point, all over the world to say, what do you need? And it was different for what the US needed versus what the Philippines needed. And what we realized as an organization and as leaders, we just need to know what our people need. Some people want women initiatives. Some people want, specific ERG groups. Some people just want a place to talk. Some people want to be left alone. Some people don't want any of that involvement in the workplace. They just want to come do their job and leave. And so again, simplification of that, right? And I always say, you're not going to please everybody. So like, look at what they're telling you, look at what you can do really well, and say to the greater population, we're going to try these things because, this is what the majority wants. We'll try to do these one-offs, but we're never good at one-offs, so we're going to do what we can to please most people. We're not going to please everybody, and just be honest about what you can't do. I think that is what I learned, like when I couldn't implement every single program for everybody, I was just honest about it. And I would get their feedback and get their buy-in. And can you just help me get these 2 programs implemented because it serves, hundreds of thousands versus 2. But also, you have to have your local leadership teams be able to implement what they can for the 2. So while a corporation might not be able to do everything for everybody, when you get your local community, your local team members, you have pods of people everywhere in your organization who can help, then you can help more people and propel these programs forward. So it's really getting people involved and making sure that it's not just corporate driven, but it's people driven. And I learned that from Andy and Joyce Lee at Alorica, honestly. Like I can remember when I first started, it was special and it was different than other organizations, but they believed in that. And I watched how things sort of organically grew within the organization. And frankly, they never really changed that. And they still really operate that way today. And they want executives to support that today. But that was a real important lesson for me along my journey at Alorica. But personally, I would say during, COVID, what I found was people are resilient. And, the greatest thing I was able to do during that time frame was just say, I don't know what this holds, what is the future, and when this is going to end, but we're just going to do this together. And then we banded together and we're like, okay, let's, get home and do these things. And, leading with that authentic and transparent communication, I think is so critical. So I think wellness is about not just programs, but how leaders lead. and how you incorporate the community and the people and how they're able to participate in these different programs and and launch their own programs, like actually sort of govern their own activities, like allow and empower the responsibility of wellness to a lot of different people, not just a group of people, not just HR, not just ops, or not just, one entity, but there's power in numbers. And I think a lot of organizations are fearful of that. It doesn't mean that you don't teach them how to govern, or, hey, if you're going to implement these programs, there's some rules. But a lot of times people will do the right thing. But, a lot of times corporate organizations operate in fear. Like, we can't do that because of this, and we can't. But I feel like if you can operate from an environment like, we'll figure it out, the people will help you figure it out. You don't have to have all the answers, and you don't have to be the one who implements everything. And the corporation doesn't have to be the governing body of every single program. And I think once you learn that, it's eye-opening and it's empowering. And it changed me as a leader.
Man, there's a lot there. It's just
Yeah.
so to unpack, but I'll pull out some nuggets that really stuck out for me that I think is meaningful for our conversation so far, and I'd love to continue it at another time. The layers that you're talking about, where there's this corporate view that you can't just solve it for everybody, but you got to have something that the company does, and then as you get closer to the people, how do you fill in the gaps of those that just don't get what they need from that overarching structure? And how do you make that regional nature? You're talking about different countries, different cultures, being able to meet people where they are. And again, the people business theme is huge. And the other part of it is really being able to look at it from the perspective of, when we talk about that human experience, especially during the pandemic, of feeling isolated, feeling emotions that you maybe don't feel like you can express, when maybe you're in an environment where you're a new employee and you're one of the first batch of people trying to figure it out in a remote experience, where you're like, I don't know if I get the culture of the business. Am I set up for success? What do I do when I'm failing, or I'm not being able to feel like I have a home here and I can be successful in my role? I don't know what I'm doing, right? All those things, those disruptions, those changes. The cool thing about it, if we're going to sit there and say, what came out of something so terrible that we could find something positive from it? And when I look at what you're saying, I sit there and go, you know what? People survive, people find a way. And so even though there wasn't a process for X to get done, people stepped back and said, well, let's go figure it out. Let's go be innovative. Let's go find a way to make this work. And what you see is, it didn't take years for people to get people to work from home and still find productivity to similar levels of what they were doing for many years prior. Some of these people were doing it in days and weeks, completely changing their business and still obviously finding those gaps. So it's really neat to be able to sit there and say that sometimes when you kind of break the mold of the structure, all your people, there's a lot that rise to the occasion and do some really cool stuff for people, and are still finding success in spite of the challenge. And that's a really neat experience that only you and many others went through. But your personal journey was honest and raw, and a lot of people don't do that. They don't open themselves. I think a lot of people, when they can trust their leadership, they feel their leadership is with them in that journey. I think they fight a lot harder towards success for themselves and for the business. So true. Um, Running out of time. I would love to go a little deeper in a couple other things. There's one thing that I want to cover, and then I want to finish off real quick on some personal stuff. So recently, you kind of highlighted some stuff from Greg Pollock, and in LinkedIn. There was this emphasis of the importance of accessible CX for deaf customers. And from your perspective as a leader, what companies and industry leaders, when they're needing to prioritize or should prioritize designing CX solutions, how do they make sure they're inclusive for the deaf and hard of hearing? What is often overlooked in caring for that community?
There's a lot overlooked. I mean, Greg really highlighted recently at the Austin Contact Center Alliance conference about, if you think about texting, there, TTY way back in the day was like the first texting. If you think about, this interaction that was created. So it was kind of cool. But if you like propel that forward and go, how's it changed? That's the problem. It hasn't. And when you think about that individual, he gave an experience that really, really meant a lot to me because he says we talk about PCI and we talk about, protecting people's information. But imagine when you're sharing your social security number and you're sharing your date of birth and you're sharing your address, there's a person listening to that, in today's environment. So I would just say you're always vulnerable when you're that person. Both my in-laws are blind, and I lost 70% of my hearing as a child, and should be wearing hearing aids today. I'm probably like 60/40, but don't. And it's because I read lips and I struggle and I'm hard-headed and I don't know why. It's something I just have to deal with, right? So as he's sharing this journey, I really related to his experiences. And then I thought about my in-laws and how I help them. And, they have technology that reads everything to them, but, and they work and they've been successful. They've raised 4 children, but there's still things today that tech is not solving for. And it's because we're not really thinking about how to treat that population, because again, you're treating the majority, you're not treating the minority. But then if you realize how much, like how many people there are that you're actually impacting. So I think as a service and a brand, you have to make a conscious effort to focus on that community. And you should be using tech. And again, it should be a group effort. Like you should have a committee to say, how can we really improve this experience for those? There's a lot of things out there that you can do with tech. There's a lot of things out there if you include them in the conversation. So I think where you're including them and where you're prioritizing accessibility is huge. So Hilton just did that. And I just actually commented on Hilton's brand because they're, actually focusing on accessibility and they're focusing on really improving this experience. And I think that's important. So I think it's about having the brand make it important. I also think it's bringing awareness to the community, and our community is so broad. I, from a leader perspective, I always had it as a priority for employees. Like, how are we serving our employees? So sometimes you just have to start there. And then if you start focusing on your employees who need this environment, then you're going to realize, oh my goodness, my customers need this as well. So I just think there's just a huge opportunity when you think about tech and how far we've come for that tech to evolve so that we are supporting accessibility to our customers. And I think that's probably my rewirement, just how can we use AI in that environment and how can we, provide a safe environment where people don't feel so vulnerable. And I love what Greg's doing. And he just opened my eyes to just the fact that we really haven't changed a lot over the years. Like we did back in the day and it should have propelled forward. But I think sometimes, we're focused too much on the majority.
Yeah, I think when you say all of that, it's a decision that a business has to be conscious of. Have you made the conscious decision to prioritize that not only this exists, but are you going to do something about it? And not just in words, but in actions, not just, yeah, that's important to me because you want to be the person that says, oh yeah, I'm for that too. Okay, but what are you doing about it? What do you know about what the customer needs, what the employee needs from that perspective? And if you don't, then you can't say you're for it because you're really not doing anything about it. So you got to be very careful on how you balance that. So I want to shift now, just a few minutes left on you personally. You have a lot going on. You got family, you have the transformation of your journey, you got the AI knowledge. How are you balancing or not? That idea between work and life. And when people always say, and they look at leaders and they go, oh gosh, I want to be just like Colleen, or when I grow up, I want to be able to be a leader. I want to be able to have that ability to go up the ladder. How do you find that balance or not? How does it work for you in your world? And then how do you share that with others that are struggling or want to be able to achieve what you've achieved? What are some insights you can share with them?
Well, I always tell everybody, I talk to people all the time. Oh, they'll say, "Oh, you're my superhero. You have 6 kids and 2 grandbabies, and how do you do it?" And honestly, there's no balance. And I tell people it's really about scheduling time and recognizing, sometimes it's imbalance and just, it's what you do in the imbalance and it's how you respond. So I took one out of the books of my employees and I scheduled one-on-ones with my kids. So I always tried to have like a moment. We had 6, so there was always chaos and that was fun, but you always have to still deal with the individual. So, I would do one-on-ones. But just, I realized I wasn't perfect. You're going to make mistakes. So I tell people most of what I can give you as a leader or as a mom in this world is, you try to schedule, you try to, do things in this perfect way, but you just give yourself grace. It's not perfect. And there's not balance. It's not, you can get up at 5 in the morning and go till midnight. I mean, I used to like, oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And there's only so many hours in a day. So you can't like doom scroll, certainly if you can doom scroll. So, the most effective way to, I think create balance is making sure that you're prioritizing the most important things. Um, you have to manage your time efficiently and you have to give yourself grace because every day is not going to be perfect. And I think fear is why people generally don't, go after their passions or their dreams. And I believe that the word no is very empowering. And so I really eliminated fear, just like, let's go for it. So you're gonna be good at some things, you're not gonna be good at others. So fear of failure was never a problem for me. And I would tell people, like, don't be afraid to fail. You're going to fail. Just fail fast, fail forward. By the way, a lot of my failures are why I'm successful today. And those are learnings and journeys. So I think everybody should have those. If you're perfect, you're not failing and you're not learning. And so you have to be curious, you have to learn. But no, I think no is empowering. So a lot of people say, when people tell you no, it fuels you to go like do better. But I also think sometimes no's good. There were leaders, good leaders who told me no, and I would just be furious and just, "Ugh." But I realized I wasn't ready. Like I had learning. So understand no, but understand who the no's coming from. Sometimes that no was empowering. Like I thought to myself, I'm going to figure out how to do it, and then I would spend time learning and being curious. And so I think there's a lot of different advices. There's so many self-help, books, but it's really the comfort level that you have in yourself and, being good at what you're doing and, giving yourself some grace. But I would say, there's just a lot of grit that you've got to do and a lot of curiosity. So nobody paved the way for me. People supported me. There were a lot of people who, put up roadblocks. And I always said I just couldn't count on anybody. I had to count on myself. Like once you learn how to like believe in yourself, count on yourself, then you can believe in others and count on others and support others. But like you got to do the work yourself. So start with yourself and focus on, your fears, what makes you great, understand your skills. Just be honest with yourself. If you can coach yourself, you can coach anybody.
Yeah. So much wisdom in what you said. Your journey obviously has had so many opportunities, like you said, to be able to believe in yourself, work on yourself, find how to still be successful in spite of the challenges, the roadblocks, and then also knowing that once you believed in yourself, there's all these people around you that were helpful and ones that weren't, and be able to figure out how does that help you in that balancing. And balancing doesn't mean equal family, equal work. Is sometimes it means, yes, I am missing that special occasion in the family for something work related and vice versa. When I'm with the family, I'm present. I'm there. It is a priority and it is a focus. And that's such awesome advice because a lot of us, especially those of us that travel a lot for work or that we constantly are working, trying to better the company, better our careers, sometimes finding that balance in family and work. It's such an interesting juggle. So with that said, I love the conversation. I know there's going to be people that want to connect with you, see what you're doing next, what your career's next chapter is going to be. How best can they do that?
LinkedIn. I mean, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm very active. So follow me on LinkedIn, message me on LinkedIn. I always respond to my messages. And then my contact information is also on LinkedIn. So you'll have my email, my cell. I'm very accessible. And I too am curious what I'm going to do next. So I'm putting the time in, investing in myself right now. Just what are my passions? What do I want those next 10 years to look like? And what do I want to give society or give to the customer service environment, and how do I want to contribute? So, I think about the last 30 years, I don't know that I ever took time to do that. So I love taking the time to do that right now. And so I'm really looking forward to what's next.
Well, we're excited for you because we know there's going to be some great stuff in the next chapter, and we're looking forward to seeing how that looks. But with that said, that's a wrap of today's episode of First Contact Stories of the Call Center. A huge thank you to Colleen
Thank
Beers
you.
for joining us. Thank you so much. And look, for those of you that want to connect with Colleen, please do so. Reach out via LinkedIn. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network. Tune in next time. Thanks for joining.